Batman Arkham Shadow is the best thing you can play with a Meta Quest 3 or Quest 3S. The almost flawless VR adventure is jam-packed with engaging, visceral combat, puzzles that require inventive thinking, and a compelling mystery as its driving narrative, with the Dark Knight working to discover the Rat King's identity and stop them before their cult of the Rat consumes Gotham. If you haven't tried this experience yet, you absolutely should. Given that it's currently free with new Quest 3 headset purchases, there's little reason not to. But this video is for everyone who has finished the story and wants to learn more about the game's dangling threads, how Camouflaj devised its twisting tale, and when we're getting more Arkham Shadow content, maybe even a sequel. I sat down with Ryan Payton, the studio head of Camouflaj, to find out answers to my burning questions in this full-on spoiler cast for Arkham Shadow. This is your final warning for spoilers. We'll be talking about the final scenes of the game from the get-go. So save this video and come back later if you have yet to roll credits. Here's what we talked about.
Ryan, it's good to see you again. We spoke a little bit before Arkham Shadow came out, but obviously now it's here. And how has the reception to this game been for you?
Well, for me and my colleagues at Camouflaj and Meta and everybody involved, I think we're really happy with the reception of the game, and relieved, and I think quite surprised by the areas of the game that have been resonating with people, because you never know. You work on this game for 4 years, and it was a really hard game to develop, and thankfully I could say I've been working on games for 20 years and having worked on big titles such as like Metal Gear Solid 4 and Halo 4, and we did Iron Man VR, and every single time it's the same thing. It's like you think you have something special, but you never quite know, and it isn't until it gets in the hands of players, and then you see the response. And so this time around, just like previous times, I felt good, but nervous. And then when the reviews started to trickle in and people started playing the game, and just looking at the community response on all the different platforms and things like that, it was just a huge relief that people are connecting with the game as well as they are.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. If you pour your heart and soul into something, you want it to be received well, and it's good when that happens.
Yeah,
And I want to talk to you a lot about some of the big moments of this game, as sort of spoiler cast, people that finish the game, maybe have a few questions. But I think before I ask you too many of my questions, I guess I want to know for you, what was the moment that you were most excited for people to experience, maybe from a gameplay or a story perspective? And then you sort of mentioned it there. What was something maybe that surprised you, that resonated with people in some way that you weren't expecting?
I hope you don't mind me cheating a little bit with but I'll keep my answers short with like the things that were surprising me, or that I thought that were going to be that I was excited to see how people were responding to. For example, the big twist as we ended the first act of the game, and you're playing as Matches Malone. You're in a prison. You're not Batman, and that is a secret that it's a very kind of right-in Metal Gear Solid 2 inspired secret that we held close to our chest for 3.5 years, and it didn't leak. Almost leaked, but didn't leak, and I was really excited to see how people were responding to that. The Shadow Batman boss fight at the end of our Scarecrow sequence is something
That's a
that
great one.
I just couldn't wait to watch people on streams and to read people's reviews, and it just could not wait. And I knew it was going to be good, but it was about maybe 2 months before ship when things really started to come together for that boss fight. And I kid you not, I was, I was in the office. It was around this time at night, so it's kind of late in Japan. It was morning in the UK with Bill. Matt Walker's next to me, and I'm in the headset reviewing everything. And I just kind of lean back in my chair, and I'm like, "What is this? Guys, what are you doing here? This is ridiculous." It just took such a huge leap forward. It felt so impressive. It was just, I think, some of the best work we've ever done as a team. That was exciting for me. And then finally, the ending is something that I was so excited to see how people were going to respond to the ending. As far as the things that were surprising me, I think the Joe Chill reveal at the end was more impactful than I expected it to be. And
Yeah, I
maybe you
definitely want to
can't
talk to you
blame
about
me.
this one.
You can't blame me because we don't. Unlike what we do with Rat King and Harvey Dent, where we do a little switcheroo and it's kind of a big reveal, right? We do the exact opposite with Joe. We had ideas, by the way. I'll
Yeah.
be the first person to tell you publicly what our plan was. We were going to call him Frost.
Okay.
It was going to be a
As a sort of
nickname that
like
people gave to
obscure it.
him. Obscure it, right? And then you find out, oh, Frost is Joe Chill. Oh, it makes so much sense. Kind of like with the other reveal that we did. But and we debated this for a year. And then I think we just said, hey, let's respect the player. Some people are going to pick up on it, and that's okay. And they could be around long for Ryan. I'm like, I think I know who that is. I think I know it's Joe Chill. I think I know who it is. And they're still going to be surprised by the reveal. And I think they're going to be hit emotionally. But to the degree that people, even like the most hardcore fans, even though we use basically the same character model from Arkham VR, that's an aged up Joe Chill, no one saw this one coming, basically.
It went
Maybe a
fully
few
over
people
my
out there on the
head.
internet.
You know, I wouldn't call myself a Batman mega fan, but I know of the Batman lore. I know of Joe Chill. I know of this character, and yeah, for me that was just how did I miss this? Just like that big reveal at the
It's like,
end, I just
yeah,
could
hid it
not
in plain
believe it.
sight, right? Right.
Because for well, obviously we're going to talk about it more, but for me, as you go into that final act, obviously it's not Joe at the commissary; it's a different character, and I thought, oh, is
Exactly.
this maybe a setup of him being the Rat King?
Exactly.
Because it kind of makes sense. He can get around the prison really easily. Maybe
Yep.
that's going to be this twist, and that's what I was expecting. And then it was a
Yep.
completely different couple of twists at the end, and I thought, okay, that's very impressive to do. I guess from at least from my perspective, with all these Batman characters that people know, not just from Arkham, but just in general of the whole
Yep.
Batman lore.
Yeah, no, totally. And you picked up on the many kind of false leads or red herrings that we sprinkled throughout the game, and that was a fun one. Was the idea that Bronze Tiger would take over the shop, and people are like, "Ooh, I think I know why." And yeah, it was that's the fun things we get to do.
Again, you mentioned sort of the Scarecrow sequence. Is that something that sort of all Arkham games have to include at some point? This kind of is that like contractually you've got to include a Scarecrow sequence? It sort of freaks the player out a little bit then, but when you actually sort of smash through it, you feel really strong and powerful. Particularly that boss fight was a really awesome experience. Sort of face off against Batman and this
Mm.
huge sort of figure that's throwing giant versions of your weapons at you.
I'll tell you what, when throughout all development, we didn't refer to it as a scarecrow sequence at all. It's actually what the players in the community have kind of named it, and it makes sense. Like it's thematic, or it's similar to the previous Arkham titles, and I mean we're definitely inspired by those. And we have Scarecrow in the game, and it's based on this kind of proto fear gas that we developed called Shadow, and all that kind of stuff, right? But the whole development, it was always about this proto fear toxin was going to be this vehicle to really go into deep into the psyche of Bruce Wayne and Batman. Um, and that's all we focused on, really. And yes, Scarecrow is the one administering it. And yes, you rip off the mask and it's Scarecrow at the end. But yeah, that's like really the truth behind it was. And I think that's one of the things we did successfully as a story is that we kept we kept coming back to Bruce's arc and his struggles. And that's why I love that. I think you see that Batman comes face to face with his shadow, and through a lot of other characters, you're kind of witnessing them battle their shadow. And I would say that Harvey Dent battled his shadow and lost.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely see that. I think particularly that sort of opening sequence for the game where when Batman's sort of running through Gotham when he hears that Harvey's been kidnapped, and you definitely see this sort of angrier, more human side to the hero, where sort of in the future he feels a little bit more like a paragon of good. In that moment, he
Yeah.
sort of feels a little bit more grey, where you're just sort of smashing your way through baddies who normally you sort of take a more restrained approach to, and this time you're just one shot punching all of these people, and that was a really
I have a
awesome way to sort of
family.
see that.
I don't care.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's sort of that more human aspect to this superhero. But obviously, then we've talked a little bit about it. I really want to know at what point did you decide you wanted Harvey Dent and sort of Two Face to be the sort of the antagonist of Arkham Shadow, and then also at what point did you decide actually we're going to make him the Rat King and have this sort of
Mm.
be obscured in some way?
Within the first few months, I think we had the concept for Rat King. We didn't know who was going to be the Rat King, but we had this idea that we did, and not in a cynical marketing way. It was we're going to have a new villain, and it's not he's not going to have any baggage, and he can be scary because you don't know who he is, or who she is, right? But and thematically, what we want to do with the rats, it was really exciting. And then, yeah, the next 2 years of development or so was, okay, who is it? Who is behind there? And you could throw out any kind of like you could probably guess four of the characters that we were at least considering at one point or the other. But Harvey Dent was always really like orbiting this concept of the Rat King, um, in part because we really were excited about having Harvey Dent in the game, and we knew his timeline, like where he was going to in the Arkhamverse, where how he needed to appear. Even early on, we knew that we wanted to do a courtroom scene, and I think the challenge was really connecting all of that and for a way to make sense. And so I kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier, but like the core nucleus of the story, from my perspective, and what I was kind of trying to help push the team in this direction was, you've got a story of two brothers. They come face, and it's a game about your shadow, and one man comes face to face with a shadow and wins, uh, temporarily at least, right? Because you can never really extinguish a shadow per the Jungian theory. And then one man comes face to face with a shadow and loses, and it's this parallel paths, right? And once we got that, to me, the whole concept of Rat King really made sense, because I look at Rat King as the the representation of the darker side of Two-Face. And
Yeah.
if anything, if I could change the whole concept of Two-Face, it would be that, um, when in the subtitles, it would be Harvey Dent speaking and then Rat King speaking, but then the collection of them, the Janus of sorts, is Two-Face, right? But
Okay.
what you find in basically in all popular media about him, it's that, like, the good side is Harvey Dent and the bad side is Two-Face. But to me, it's the collection of the two alters. So yeah, that's the kind of the concept that I came up with. I got really excited about that. The team DC got really excited about that, and it was fun to explore the origin of that side of Harvey Dent, both emotionally and also physically, like how that happened, right?
Because also, I really liked with sort of this sort of becoming Two Face. You even tease it right at the beginning of the game again when, um, again, sort of using that sort of meta Batman knowledge when you hear that Harvey's been doused in gasoline, and you think, oh, okay, this is going to be
Yeah,
kind of
here
like
we
the
go.
Dark Knight. He's going to get burnt. He's going to be half his face. He's going to be angry, something like that. And then it doesn't happen, and you go, okay, this game's almost set up of like, maybe we don't really know what's going to happen because there's a big stretch between Origins and City. You know, we don't have to see it all in this one go. And so yeah, it was this sort of roller coaster of emotion, and also as you sort of you mentioned these two brothers, you get to see a lot of that backstory between these two characters,
Mm.
between Bruce and Harvey, and that was a really exciting story to watch. And there was also a part of me going like, why are we covering this? Is something going to happen to Harvey? And it's like, and then yeah, it does all come together, and you sort of feel a little bit silly afterwards, thinking, how did I not see some of these bits coming? Because it does come
Mm.
together so neatly. But I guess that's the elements of a great twist, is you sort of do see it coming, but it still catches you off guard.
Yeah, that was always a tough needle to thread, because what we didn't want to happen was it's too obvious, and then obviously we didn't want it to happen in a way that was, it felt like it came out of left field and like it wasn't earned. So you're
Mhm.
trying to ride that perfect line of you're setting it up, but people aren't noticing the sleight of hand, and that's just part of the challenge and the fun. And I think we pulled it off pretty well. And it's funny you mentioned the Dark Knight, because and I think you picked up on it, but yeah, we're basically doing the inverse of what the Dark Knight does. Because if you remember, they've got a courtroom scene early on in the film with Harvey Dent, and you're like, oh, I know
Mhm.
what's going to happen, and then the guy pulls out the plastic gun, and you're like, oh wait, it doesn't happen this way, and then he becomes Two-Face in a way you didn't really expect with the gasoline. So we just kind of inverted that, and that was pretty fun. So yeah, I keep saying everything's fun, but yeah, it's been a hard project, but a really fun one to work on.
And then I think one of my other favorite moments in this game I want to talk about is that scene when, as matches, you are locked in solitary confinement, and the your friend next to you is obviously Joker. How did you decide you wanted to sort of approach that of sort of bringing the Joker into this game, but you don't really see him, but you at the same time learn a lot about this character. Like clearly he loves Batman because he instantly susses you out, and sort of
Yeah,
how did you decide to approach this as it just being, because there's this element of in VR you are just sat in this boxed room listening to audio, which sort of seems the complete opposite of what VR's for. So there's so much I just want to hear you talk about that
sure,
scene
yeah.
in particular.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, because I don't think I've spoken about this publicly. So hopefully this will be fun for your listeners and viewers. Uh, that idea came in pretty late in the game, in terms of this. We knew we had solitary confinement for a long time, because I would talk about, uh, because in large part, as you know, this is a game like a with a prison setting. There's sort of prison stories like Shawshank Redemption and games like Escape from Butcher Bay, Chronicles of Riddick, that were core source of inspiration. I have this idea of like these like prison fantasies, obviously in
Hmm.
quotation marks, because who has,
Yeah.
unless you're kind of unusual, fantasies about prison. But to me, there's like a checkbox of things we had to do. We had to have the yard. We had to have you get betrayed early on, and some guy's trying to earn your trust and then kind of betrays you. We need to have a commissary. We had to have all these different things, I think, to kind of sell that fantasy, especially in VR where you're immersed in the Quest 3 and you're just feeling it all like in a way that's different than a flat screen game. I thought that was really important to me. In solitary confinement, I wanted to experience what it was going to be like in solitary confinement in VR. So, um, and we knew that we were going to have that beat for a long time. In parallel, there's this looming question of what do you do about Joker in this game? And
Yeah.
because he takes up all the oxygen out of a room. He's he's beloved by fans and for good reason. But you've also got a lot of people, and for years I'm watching YouTube videos, reading articles about Arkham and how people are thinking about it, and articles that say, "Hey, if there's gonna be a new Arkham game, please no Joker as the main villain." And we took that to heart, and we wanted to tell our own story, and we felt like the Rocksteady and Warner Brothers Montreal team did such a great job with Joker. Like, could we really do another great
Yeah.
rendition of him? So my whole stance for the first 85% of development was no Joker at all. And
Okay.
then all credit, I think, to my colleagues and to the writing team, especially, where they would kind of settle me down and say, "Look, we understand and we agree at a high level, but you can't not have Joker in the game." And so we kind of had to come up with a way where it was enough, but not too much, and how we can be like literally confined. And I think we could have had the model in there and done the facial performance and everything, but yeah, we wanted to kind of find that hit that delicate balance where he isn't taking over too much. And again, credit to the team for that one moment you're talking about. That wasn't my idea. I think it's probably Chris Sims's idea that that immediately Joker would be in on the whole ruse of
Yeah. It's
masquerading as matches. And I thought that was a brilliant idea.
And I think that whole scene also has what I really liked of this sort of immersive, sort of as you called it, prison fantasy of as you are exploring this space, there are ways in which not really changing the story because obviously it's a story you're telling, but you can sort of put your influence on it, the way that you respond to questions. So I think I replayed that scene a couple of times because I wanted to get a screen grab of it. So I played it again, but both times I still clicked. I didn't want to go through Joker's knock knock joke because, like, no, my Batman has no time for this.
No,
But
no
that
time for
obviously
that.
then I don't know if you did then ask. He then does his joke, but that's the thing of my intaking of the content is obviously very different to someone else's, and there are all these little moments throughout the whole prison. You know, if you explore and you interact with characters, you can sort of follow this story of I forget who the human is, but Woody, the marionette puppet. You
Mhm.
know, you can see how your sort of the two cellmates there interact with each other, and eventually there's death in the prison, and all these other sort of side stories you can pick up on if you want to, and that was a really sort of fun experience to sort of have that immersive storytelling that goes beyond the typical Arkham. Oh, you found this recording, and there are still some
Mm.
of those recordings, but it's a little bit more. You are taking part in that wider world of Gotham rather than just hearing about the side stories that happen around the Arkham games.
I think you nailed it. I think that was really the intent, and I think we delivered on that to I think a good extent. I I love those kind of branching pathways, and but it obviously leads to different levels of scope. And you oftentimes asking the question like, would Bruce Wayne or Batman or Matches really choose these different paths? So that was always a delicate balance. But in the solitary confinement cell, there's also additional dialogue if you choose not to engage with Joker on the first night and just go straight to sleep. So that's something that's kind of fun for
Okay.
people to check out. Another one that I really, really love that I think very few people have probably experienced is that remember there's that scene where you get this mission Carmine Falcone, um, and to go get that's right, to go get the earpiece from Bronze Tiger in Day 4, and that way he can communicate with you. And so when you get that from Bronze Tiger, very few people do this, but our writers had the wherewithal and the foresight to support, like write and record lines for Falcone if you go back to Falcone immediately after getting the earpiece. So you've got it in your ear. And he's like, "What are you doing here? You got the earpiece so I can communicate with you. I don't need to see you." And you can keep talking to him, and there's more lines, and there's so much funny stuff. And he's
Oh, that's
like,
so good.
"Get it through your thick skull, Matches. I'm getting worried about you." It's like such a funny bit. Really think it's good stuff there.
But I really love that sort of thing in video games, of the stuff that sort of maybe 99% of players won't
Yep,
experience, but for that those few players, they go, I wonder what happens if I do just go back to him. There's just
exactly,
that little bit of Easter egg that is, rewards you for thinking outside the box.
exactly, exactly.
This sort of interview's coming to a bit of a close. I've got a few questions about sort of Easter eggs that have been dropped from this game that sort of perhaps tie into something we might see a bit more of in the future. Um,
Mm.
Sort of as you mentioned, sort of exploring the prison. If you go back to solitary confinement when you've got that earpiece in and you have to go and speak to the rat catcher, you can
Mm.
see on, I believe it's at that moment, you can see on Joker's cell that he's been discharged to HQ, obviously setting up Joker and Harley and Quinzel. And there are a few of these other little threads that have been dropped in of Scarecrow, obviously Harvey Dent now is sort of becoming that Two-Face persona. Obviously, I imagine you can't say too much about it now, but is there sort of this? Have you got ideas of what you might do if you had the opportunity to make a follow-on to Arkham Shadow?
Yeah, I think we've been pretty open about how the team had just the best time with the partnership with Warner Brothers Interactive and with DC and with the community, the Arkham community that we suspected was still very large and engaged and wanted more content, even if it's on a platform that they weren't expecting it to be on. And we saw the initial reaction back on May 1st to what people initially thought of that. And it's been just a fun roller coaster ride all the way to ship and through that with the announcement of the Meta Quest 3S, where okay, fine, maybe not at 499 for the Quest 3, but I could jump in for the Quest 3S with the game bundled at 299 US dollars.
Yeah.
Like that was a really fun announcement. And so we've just been with this whole experience thinking, look, if the game does well and people respond positively to it, we hope that we can make it a very easy decision for leaders across Meta and Warner Brothers and DC to ask us to do more. But it's really up to them, and it's really up to like the community and like how they respond to the game over the next X amount of months. So in the meantime, what we're doing in the short term is the entire Camouflaj team, not a single person removed, is completely dedicated to the game. We've got our 1.1 fix update coming out in later this month, which has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of improvements, quality of life improvements, bug fixes, crash reductions. A lot of feedback we actually sourced from the community, who's been amazing, just sending us things like, "Hey, did you know if like kind of what we're talking about, but like in a bad way? You know, if you do this, 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 and this, and this, and this, there's a bug." And like, wow, we had no idea that people would even try to do that. Okay, so making those fixes, and we've got another big update with more content in December, and then we're looking into next year as well with like additional content we're going to be dropping, including but later this year we're aiming to have the character viewer added to the game. We're going to be adding more challenge maps to the game, and
That's
and
great
also
news. I
some
love
additional
those
story
challenge
content.
maps.
Yeah, and the team
Oh,
did a great
okay.
job with those.
Yeah.
And some story content. Now, we're not going to do like a big free DLC kind of like Arkham Knight did, but we've got content that didn't make it in time for ship that we are just infusing the game with right now that will tie up some loose ends in the story, but maybe also introduce some like new questions. Um, and honestly, some of them are already written and recorded, and we just added them to the game. And some of them we're working on right now based on what players are responding to. So it's a really cool
Okay.
kind of two-way street we have with the community, even though they don't know which things we're watching and which things are going to be new and which things are reactive, but that's part of the fun.
Well, that's really exciting because as you said, you mentioned you've obviously read some of my reviews. I have really adored this game, and so yeah, if you're looking for people to say, "Hey, I definitely want another one," to sort of back that corner, I would absolutely love to see another VR Arkham game because I think when I first spoke to you about it, that you mentioned, and I think you mentioned to a few other publications, you want this to be, Arkham Asylum will feel like Arkham Asylum in VR. Not exactly a
Yeah.
port, but it has that same sense of scope. And I think that I did see this reaction from some readers of, oh, I don't really know, like, can it be like? is that where VR's at? And then you sort of actually do play this and you go, oh no, it really does live up to that really high bar that you set yourself of this feels like Arkham Asylum in a VR headset, and it was a really, really awesome experience.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you playing through the game and putting all those thoughts into the review. Is something that the team poured over, and with all the reactions we're getting. And I think, one thing I think, I know we have to close out pretty soon, but I say that the um, one thing I think we did well, and we did a lot of things really poorly on this project. I mean, we need hours, many, many hours to go over all the mistakes that I made and the tough journey that was to get to ship. But one thing I think we did really good was I think early on, starting especially around Gamescom, we set expectations with the public about the game. We didn't. We came out and said it's not an open world game. It's not a continuation of Arkham Knight. We're looking at Arkham Asylum for our core inspiration from the feature set, from a game length perspective, from a pacing perspective, and I think that helped people kind of set expectations for when they sit down and they play the game. And obviously, it goes into very different directions, and it's got its own story and surprises and things like that. But I think it was really important that we set expectations, and I think that people met us halfway and understood like why we did the things that we did, and that's just part of been honestly my favorite thing this entire year from a professional perspective has been the dialogue with players in the Arkham community. I didn't expect to love it as much as I do, but like just it's been so fun. And it continues to this day, and it will continue for the next several months as we continue to update the game and keep talking to them and keep interacting with the people that who played the game and want more. So we're here to do it, and we feel really lucky to be able to continue to work on it.
Awesome. I'm glad you're feeling really positive about it all, and it's been awesome getting to speak to you today.
Oh,
Ryan,
likewise.
thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.